All right. There it is, folks. We have a very special guest. His name is Spencer Ackerman, and he has a book coming out. And I wanted to actually start off. He's a NatSec reporter, a I don't know what to say about Magneto acolyte and author of Reign of Terror, but he has a new book that just came out, Reign of Terror. I've been trying to have him on for a while. He also has a Substack called foreverwars.substack.com. And it's a pleasure to have you, Spencer. I've covered a lot of your articles on here in the past, and love your mustache and love your work. And I'm excited to have you to talk about, 9/11, how I wasn't involved in any meaningful capacity. That's why I brought you here.
I'm glad we cleared this up.
Yeah, can we clear the air? You're a NatSec guy. You know this stuff. I was not, right? I have nothing to do with anything that happened.
I think we've, laid this to rest definitively.
Okay, thank you. All right, perfect. All right, so before we get to your book and before we get to the aftermath, the war on terror, the way that the American government used the fervor that they whipped up to take away civil liberties and change not only the world but America in like really dramatic ways, I have a video of you that I want to play. Now you're not going to be able to see it.
Oh no.
Oh yes. I found this while I was looking at. Wait, fuck. Wait, let me see if I. Oh no, I think you were at Wired at the time.
Is this the one where I get shot?
With the LRAD? Or no, it's not the LRAD. Sorry. Well, you have a bunch of videos.
It's the millimeter wave device. The
heat one. The heat one.
Yeah. This is the one where I get cooked. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Great. Yeah. Post my L's.
I wanna show that. What is it called though? I can't find it now. God damn it. Heat gun? No.
It was. It starts with. It has active in there somewhere. Active.
Oh, active denial. Active denial.
The active denial system. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like entirely euphemistic and creepy.
Here it is. Wait. What the fuck? Wired literally re-released this 5 days ago. Oh no, dude.
Did they really?
Yeah. Danger Room Video Ops. Spencer Ackerman zapped by pain ray.
Oh man.
Okay, I can't. Okay, chat. Spencer's awesome. You've probably already seen this video before, but I have to show this to you one more time. Also, don't worry, it was 2012, right? That's
Something
why he's That's why he's dressed and looks the way he does. Okay.
This resulted. So this resulted in me like getting followed by Prodigy from Mobb Deep.
Oh really?
Yeah, it's wild. Like CNN had me on to talk about getting shot by this thing. And as I'm like talking to CNN, I say like the thing it's kind of crazy because there's no round that you get hit with. There's no outward sensation ahead of just feeling this impressively compacted, intense heat. So as I told CNN, like it's not like Mobb Deep said, when the slugs penetrate, you feel a burning sensation. You just feel a burning sensation. And Prodigy from Mobb Deep apparently was like watching CNN and was just like, oh shit, this guy just quoted me on CNN. So like he's followed me. R.I.P. the God Prodigy.
That's awesome. What do you have to say for yourself that many people are saying you look like a young libertarian in this fit?
No, I look terrible. It's you got to wake up like extremely early. This was, I want to say like that weird season in DC that like starts out bitterly cold, and by something like 11 o'clock is at like 75 degrees or something like that. It's no excuse. Like there's still my clothes. I still chose to look that way.
Yeah, you got the pinstripe suit on. I don't know, but here, all right, let's just play you getting your
yeah. Just if you don't like the fit, you're gonna enjoy watching me get shot. So there you go.
you are right here. Spencer, for those of you who don't know, is getting zapped by the military's microwave gun. The reason why I talked about this recently is because of the Havana syndrome, which you and I can also talk about as well in a little bit. But here, let's watch this real quick.
Okay. Now, if I didn't know where the active denial system was and that it was going to fire, I would just think this blast of heat was coming from out of nowhere.
So how did it feel? It boils the water particles in your skin, right?
Yeah, so it's not quite a microwave. It's even like more like finely compacted. It's a millimeter wave thing. So I'm not quite cooking. But I guess I am cooking. I'm just like cooking through convection, like very early, like very like superficially on my skin. It feels terrible. It really feels like you're just like an oven has been like forcibly blasted onto a part of your chest. Like you're like
Oh, they
instant
can
takeover, you have to
target.
move.
Oh, I thought it was like an area, but they can go as small as like target a part of your chest if they want to.
It was basically like, and this thing is like multiple football fields away from me,
Yeah.
while like it's being aimed at me. But I recall it coming like the bottom of my chest to like maybe around the top of my neck. And you just hit with extremely intense heat, and you think you're going to like withstand it. You go there expecting to, but it's just like a really intense blast of heat, and you make yourself get out of the way. And
Yeah.
that was supposedly for crowd control outside of military bases if there's a protest. So,
Well, kind of like
real great thing all around.
kind of like a LRAD, right? The long range acoustic device, which was originally created for crowd control purposes,
Yeah,
and it was
exactly.
just being used or at least experimented on in Iraq, and now you have it in Portland. You know?
Yeah.
And
Inevitably, these things, well, not just inevitably, these things generate their own markets. And when wars, particularly ground elements of wars, start to recede and these things become less useful, less relevant, in those circumstances, they're extremely relevant at home, particularly when you have an entirely different element of the counterterrorism apparatus at the Department of Homeland Security that basically exists to launder public money in the name of spending it on counterterrorism relevant stuff at police departments around the country so they can afford stuff like that.
yeah, I mean, time and time again, my speculation is that this is part of the reason why the Bushmaster or the AR-15 is so popular as a weapon, is because like there was so many in surplus supply in the aftermath of Vietnam that like we had to, or in different versions of that had to be sold somewhere. But maybe I'm wrong about it. I don't know. But that's what I suspect is the reason why AR-15 became like the most popular gun in America. Other than the fact that, you know, it's very easy to shoot. So easy that women and children can do it with ease without any sort of like technical expertise. But anyway.
But not like a Kalashnikov.
What?
But not like a Kalashnikov.
Well, yeah. No, not like a Kalashnikov. What do you mean? Well, but I'm talking about American manufacturers.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like, it just isn't. I mean, like, I'm not like a gun guy, but just in terms of having like a cheap and very usable utilitarian firearm, it's still like more complex a machine than
Oh,
something
100%.
Like that. Yeah.
No, I was just talking about like why it's so popular in America and why like it was the must-have gun. Even so far as like people claiming falsely that it's like great for home defense when it's not. It's a long range, like it's a weapon to shoot multiple targets at once. Long range.
I don't honestly know. I suspect some of the military cosplay is there as well as military utility, but I thought it's also because of how customizable it is.
Yeah, of course, tactical, which means that you can mod it, you can add so many different cool bells and whistles onto it, and that means you can sell more stuff on top of everything else. And because everything, every part of the American identity is like directly tied to whatever you consume, a lot of people have made owning an AR-15 to be their identity. An important part of that, I recognize that I'm currently wearing a hat that has an AR-15 on it. It says Hog Life, but this is a meme.
Okay.
So I just don't want, I'm not like a big gun guy. Anyway, all right, so let's talk about it. 9/11. Were you in New York when it happened?
I was across the river in New Jersey at Rutgers University. I was a senior at the time.
Did you see anyone dancing on the rooftops?
No, that didn't happen.
Okay, so that was a lie. Got it.
But that also, among many conspiracy theories that spread early, that was one of them. That was always there. I suspect, when it comes up, Trump is repeating something that he has half remembered from the conspiracy theories of yesteryear that he would definitely have been exposed to in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. How did you feel? How did that guide your writing? Because I know you've talked about this in other interviews, so I'm just like stealing from better journalists that have interviewed you already on this to be like, I want you to talk about your personal experience, because I feel like you have admitted that you were whipped up in that frenzy as well.
Yeah, definitely. Which is like one of the, things that I think I'm trying to say with the book is not that like anyone should feel like this isn't me feeling superior to anyone. This is me trying to come to grips with like a very deeply, a very widely spread phenomenon that I was part of as well. That like I immediately felt fury and anger. New York was my home. I'm a native New Yorker. I felt, on 9/11, like everyone I cared about could die at any moment. And, also, especially from a couple days later when I was able to get back into the city, I saw people from all over the country like drive all night to try and do whatever they could to aid the relief effort at Ground Zero. So there was a spirit of solidarity that was there that got directly manipulated by the Bush administration with the rapid acquiescence of the Democratic Party and an entire, like, really widespread apparatus of justification that turned that into a feeling of national anger, fury, retribution, and revenge. And I had sort of no other, it's not that I didn't have another framework for viewing it. It's that I felt that anger too. And I was being told that this was the proper way to express that anger because the United States was so innocent. And being, a New Yorker and just seeing, just how devastatingly, direct this was to have smelled 9/11, to remember seeing, military vehicles on the streets of Manhattan, checkpoints getting set up, and so on. We could have taken that moment and interpret it as a way of feeling solidarity with people who are victims of frequent U.S. airstrikes and other military and intelligence activity around the globe, and instead we viewed it as a tool of exceptionalist vengeance because that suited elite interests. I certainly felt along that same kind of conveyor belt, and it took me just way too long to realize that this was a savage and barbaric way of thinking and understanding the world. But it was one that portrayed itself as the only civilized, serious, and mature option. And, at this point, I was working at The New Republic, which was a liberal magazine that was sort of the vanguard of like war on terror bloodthirst. And everyone there in the relevant positions sort of repeated and echoed that. And like this was, again, what passed itself off. The media environment of the post 9/11 era is a psychotic thing, a censorious thing, one that like makes all discussion today of so-called cancel culture like really just, you know, adorable in retrospect. Like there was an extremely narrow band of elite opinion about an exercise in empire and you know, geopolitical aggression, and all of it was respected.
What was your turning point to start recognizing that, like, okay, maybe our civil liberties are crumbling a little bit?
Well, so like the first doing
Wait,
at the New
you got
Republic,
you.
I was
I don't know
22
why.
years
Wait, hold
old,
on. Can you hear me?
was reporting a story shortly after. Hello?
Oh, sorry. There's a little bit of a delay. I don't know what happened, but like I couldn't hear anything you said. It just like cut off.
Okay. You
Okay.
said like what was the turning point?
Yeah, what was the turning point? Yeah, start from there. There's a little bit of lag.
So like, so the New Republic, like the first thing that they had me do really when I was like a 22-year-old, turning 23, was shortly after the invasion of Iraq. Me and an older colleague, John Judas, who I got to learn from, did a story about how like some of the justification, like in particular the justifications that Saddam Hussein was tied to Al Qaeda and was trying to like develop actively nuclear weapons, were based on manipulated intelligence, like demonstrable lies. So doing that story kind of made me the Iraq person. And like I had built up this insane like lattice of justification for the idea of the Iraq war as something beneficial to human rights because it was getting rid of a dictator. It was just an insane thing to think. And I like became in charge of a blog that the magazine set up to sort of like hold itself accountable on Iraq. So like I was the guy who like every day had to like research and write how like terrible the war was going. And this is at like the very beginning of the war coalescing into a nightmare.
Wait, what year was
this?
this?
So by like the spring, by March of 2004, like Iraq was just a charnel house and a nightmare. And like by the summer, I started writing pieces like very like, you know, fearing that I was going to get fired, which would happen like 2 years later.
How many death threats did you get?
How like the U.S. needs to get out of Iraq.
How many death threats did you get for being a un-American commie during that process?
It was like the death threats, like just eventually, like you get used to in a lot of respects, but in this case, it was like from the guy who owns the magazine who was the most pissed at me.
Yeah, that's never good. But yeah, no, you definitely do get used to it after a while. But yeah, no, I don't know. Does it feel good to be right now? No.
No,
Maybe.
I mean, no, it's just as a journalist, making sure that the way you approach the world and approach representing what's happening in an enterprise as profound, as destructive, and as encompassing as a global war, you want to make sure that the way you approach telling that story is not through this prism of American exceptionalism that holds that America has the right to set the terms for the rest of the world, which means capital has the right to set the terms for the rest of the world. And the more time you spend reporting on the war on terror, the more you run up against the degree to which only a very narrow band of thinking is considered respectable when considering what to do about the war on terror, those being basically liberal solutions, solutions that take operations of the war on terror as debatable, in their wisdom, but sort of never in their justice. Never questioning the right of America to, for instance, set up a global digital surveillance panopticon, things like that. To say nothing of the more lethal applications of global American destruction.
So, we can talk a little bit more about how Americans inadvertently suffered as a consequence of the machine of the American state just basically doing round-the-clock surveillance, taking away our civil liberties, setting up the surveillance state, greatly beefing that up, which has been a bipartisan effort. But also in your book, you mentioned Fahim Qureshi and the other side, the victims in Afghanistan and also Pakistan, and how they suffered. You wanna talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you for bringing them up. One of the things that is very conspicuous when you read, the varied accounts, journalistically and otherwise, of the war on terror, is that particularly when they're told by Americans, they focus on American perspectives, and if there are Iraqi or Pakistani or Afghan or down the line lives or characters, they kind of exist on the periphery of aiding the American, do the thing the American is there to do. And rarely, certainly not consistently, did we get what the war looked like to the people who merely are forced by American prerogative to, and other prerogatives as well, to endure and seek to survive. And I told the story of Obama's first drone strike, which is a story that has been told before, but not through the eyes of a 13-year-old at the time, Fahim Qureshi, who survived it. Fahim Qureshi was a 13-year-old boy in tribal Pakistan who was kind of on the periphery of a big family celebration on a Friday. One of his older cousins had returned home from a successful overseas business trip, and like everyone was preparing to celebrate. The CIA took that gathering and the enthusiasm apparently of that celebration and interpreted it as a potential terrorist gathering and launched a drone strike. This was the third day of Obama's presidency. And Fahim Qureshi remembered feeling like his body had caught fire. He was in a coma for 40 days. He lost an eye. His body was extremely badly burned, practically on half of his body. And when he came out of his coma, he learned that a lot of his older male relatives had been killed in the strike. And so now he would have to play a major role in earning money for his family and doing kind of whatever sort of work his body could perform. And I asked him, like, what do you think about Barack Obama? And he said, he said, the drone strikes, would occasionally kill some bad people. I don't deny that. But most often they killed people like me. And they did it almost casually. He was basically communicating. And he said, if there's ever a list of tyrants in the world, Barack Obama's name has to be on it because of the drone strikes.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that's a perspective that a lot of us in the media tended to present. And that was an enormous, enormous failure during the ongoing and still war on terror.
I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but how many times did Barack Obama apologize for drone strikes? And what was the demographic makeup of the people that he apologized for?
As it happens, I do know off the top of my head.
Oh, well, that was what we call a layup.
Yes. So I appreciate that. The alley-oop was very successful. There is an incident in 2005 when a drone strike on a suspected Islamic State position ends up killing an American and an Italian, two considered, white men, who were being held hostage by the Islamic State. Barack Obama apologized for that drone strike. It's the only time. I can't tell you how often in talking to Yemeni, Pakistani, and other survivors of drone strikes or relatives of people who didn't survive, afterwards that came up, because the drone war or the drone strikes were operated as official secrets, and so no official acknowledgement outside of Fahim Qureshi would get like a bag of blood money that was also supposed to work as hush money, and he didn't want that. He wanted the basic dignity of having the person who wrongfully maimed him own up to it, apologize for it, and try, outside of throwing him a bag full of cash, make it right. Like that in your everyday life, you would understand that as kind of the basic minimum of civilized behavior in this circumstance. And only when victims of drone strikes were white did something approaching that happen. And that's not something that people who aren't white in those circumstances forget or not have it be a focus of attention.
Yeah, for the chatters who think he said 2005, he's talking about 2015, by the way.
2015, sorry about that.
Yeah, because everyone, I have a very active chat who loves being like, oh, gotcha, Obama wasn't president back then. Like, yeah, dude, thanks. You got it. Anyway,
sorry,
yeah, he apologized after the drone kills American Italian held by Al-Qaeda. There was also, of course, Kunduz, the Doctors Without Borders bombing as well. Where it was a Doctors Without Borders hospital that was bombed, right? In artillery fire, and in the aftermath of that, I believe every victim got what? How much money did they get? Hold on, let me just look that up. It was like $6,000 or something. Like, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, the war on terror creates, by the estimation of the Brown University Costs of War Project, and it's a very conservative analytic estimate, 900 roughly 1,000 people dead. And there's an experience after Vietnam. Sorry, are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here. You're cutting in and out a little bit, but right, I'm still here.
Keep going. After Vietnam, the Pentagon takes as a lesson that offering body counts as a measure of... Hey, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, offering body counts as a measure
of progress in a war was ultimately going to be a liability as a public relations exercise. And so very early on, the Pentagon refused to acknowledge in any systemic way how many people it had killed in the war on terror. And while that was kind of quickly seen as a reasonable thing for the Pentagon to offer by journalists, because there's an intuitive logic to how, killing X number of people does not amount to Y outcome in wars like the ones the United States was in after 9/11. It had the effect, particularly the cumulative effect, of unpersoning hundreds of thousands of people. Ultimately, we will likely learn, never the full extent, but, quite likely in the millions. These are...
Oops. Wait. Okay. Spencer, we lost you. I don't know if you can still hear me. Hold on a moment, chat. We're experiencing a little bit of technical difficulties here. I'm going to disconnect and then reconnect to the conversation, hoping that freaking Discord, man, not great for calls, okay? Wait, maybe it's literally my Discord? Hold on one second. I'm going to restart my Discord real quick. Yeah, I don't know why it's like not letting me. Oh, here it is. Can you hear me?
I can. Sorry, did that fully cut out? That fully cut out, right?
Yeah. It's okay.
Sorry.
All right, we're back. We're good.
Okay.
Let me just get back to the desktop here. Turn off the camera. Turn it back on. Okay, and we're back. Okay, perfect. All right. You were talking about. You can hear me, right?
I can. I don't know how much of that you got, or if we should just move on, or what.
We were talking about how offering numbers in the aftermath of like Vietnam, American government figures out very quickly that offering numbers is not great, even though the media finds it to be a reasonable thing or enough. I think that's where we left it, and then it got cut off completely. Okay, I think you're frozen again. Oh no. Hello? Oh no. Chat, stop saying leftist production. It's not my fault. It's just Discord is not great. And also the internet connection is not great. Spencer, you're back, I think. Can you speak? Hello? Oh no.
All right, we got ourselves a disaster.
Okay, I can hear you, but right now I can hear you, but I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me? I think I might need to change the server or something. Even though the region is automatic, that could be one way to. Maybe let's see if this works. Okay, it definitely didn't work. It made it worse. Yeah, the CIA is not happy with this conversation, dude. You could call him on Discord instead of using a server. Damn, bro, that's such a good idea because I am literally calling him on Discord, man. So how about you, keep your good ideas to yourself. This is quite literally a Discord call. Wait, hold on. Hello? Hello? Wait, okay. I think this might be cooked, boys. Nope. Hello? Spencer, can you hear me?
Can we salvage this? I'm so sorry.
No, it's all good. Don't worry about it. Okay, you're not going to be able to see me. Maybe this will help a little bit more.
Okay.
And we'll just have your face on, and then I will turn my camera back on my screen. Okay. All right, let's do it that way. I think that's probably better. All right, so where were we?
So I'll end like the point real quick. It's that the military early on in the war on terror, owing to overcorrecting a mistake from Vietnam, decides that it will not release any kind of systemic tally of people dead in the war on terror. And this turns out to be a profound decision that ends up not only allowing for disputes about how many people the war on terror kills, but basically unpersons people after they die. If we don't even know how many people are dead, we certainly don't know even the basics about them, such as their name. And I wanted to make sure in the book that when possible, we could attach names to people and particular experiences, given just how often throughout reporting over the years, I heard from people that basic dignity was not very often extended to them.
Yeah, absolutely. There was I also want to talk about something that happened in our mass surveillance programs that routinely denied constitutional rights to Muslims in the mass surveillance and even torture programs that the American government routinely applied to Muslim citizens living on U.S. soil and also abroad by mentioning Adam Hasan. But before we get to that, actually, you know what? Let's talk about that right now because then I wanna talk about after that I want to talk about the comparisons that you make to the FBI program on like white supremacist terror and how like the American government treats white supremacist terror rather in comparison to like Islamist radical fundamentalist Islamic terror and its treatment. So let's talk about Adam Hasan. If you want to give a little bit of background information on this person.
Adam Hasan is an extraordinary human being who survives. He's a Palestinian. He's a refugee in Lebanon at the beginning of his life. As a young man, he survives the Lebanese Civil War, emigrates to the United States, settles in Miami, gets like computer programming jobs, and like active in his mosque, contributes to a lot of Muslim charitable organizations, particularly for refugees, because that's his experience. And shortly after 9/11, Congress passes the Patriot Act, which, among other things, makes certain charitable contributions or contributions to what was at the time charitable entities, elements of material support, it's called, to terrorism, illegal, basically a crime. So it criminalizes donations of this kind. Usually that's not applied in retrospect. But what happens is Adam has the unfortunate coincidence of having known a guy named Jose Padilla from around the mosque in Miami. Jose Padilla in 2002 is accused of trying to detonate a dirty bomb in the United States and is held for a long time in military custody, total violation of his constitutional rights. And while the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, what would become the Department of Homeland Security, don't ever admit to this, he was being held because he was an associate of Jose Padilla's. And throughout his time in pretrial detention, it was many, many years, nearly 5 years in pretrial detention, there was pressure put on Adam to become an informant. He consistently refused. The treatment he experienced in prison got worse. And eventually, they found charitable contributions that he made a week after the Patriot Act passed that played a part in his ultimate indictment alongside Jose Padilla in criminal court. Interesting fact, Trump Cabinet Secretary Alex Acosta was at the time the U.S. prosecutor who prosecuted, the U.S. attorney, the federal prosecutor who prosecuted Adam.
Who else?
Adam was sentenced to 15 years.
Who else did Acosta prosecute? I'm thinking that name sounds really familiar. Who else did Acosta prosecute? And definitely
in Miami.
Yeah, in Miami, and definitely didn't, and definitely was not as aggressive or as draconian in his prosecution. The name escapes me.
Yes, it's hard to remember. Anyway,
I'm
sure that person, we won't hear from them ever again.
Yeah, Jeffrey Epstein, chat.
Yes,
that's what I'm talking about.
One.
That's the guy.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interestingly, Acosta asked the court for a life sentence for Adam, which the judge rejected because the United States could not demonstrate that Adam was in any way materially tied to any act of violence, let alone any victim of any act of violence. But, when you are the co-defendant of Jose Padilla, as he put it, like, I knew I was never going to be acquitted. He becomes a unique figure, a pioneer in the war on terror yet again, when in 2017, after he finishes serving his prison sentence, he expects he would be deported, most likely back to Lebanon. Instead, ICE puts him in custody in upstate New York on grounds of suspicion. This ultimately comes from a notorious jailhouse snitch, and this will play an important role in Adam's ultimate freeing. But he is a terrorism suspect, a terrorism risk rather, and so ICE keeps him in detention until they can find a place to deport him to. But since he's a Palestinian and he's a stateless person, Israel certainly isn't going to take him. There's no Palestinian authority in reality that could repatriate him even were it interested. Lebanon is similarly not interested. And then something extraordinary happens, which is a never used section of the Patriot Act, which was very controversial in 2001, that allows for the indefinite detention of non-deportable non-citizens, basically stateless people like Adam. And so for the first time ever, the Justice Department, the Department of Homeland Security during the Trump administration exercised this power and say, we suspect that Adam, who at this point is a man in his late 50s, who's never once been accused at all of connection to any act of violence, is a threat to national security, a terrorism threat. And this leads to a habeas corpus case that lasts for 2 years. The Justice Department is on the verge of losing that case when suddenly they decide that they can find a place for Adam to live in Rwanda, as long as he voids the lawsuit instead of kind of forcing it along. So the Justice Department definitively loses this power that it presumes to have in court. Rather than challenge that power, once that power was really seriously up for challenge, they decided it was easier to let him free, which is an ominous thing. Adam Hasan today is exactly what anyone who spent time listening to him would suspect he is. Basically a fun-loving, like, uncle. He sends me a lot of corny videos. He is on TikTok much, much, much more than I am, much more than my wife is, much more than anyone, my age and older probably ought to be. And Adam is in that category, but obviously, let the man do what he wants. And I wanted people to see that the war on terror, has this profound, devastating impact on people like Adam Hasan, on tens, if not hundreds of thousands of Adam Hasans, if not millions, when we consider especially how many people are made to be refugees by the war on terror. And very often stories like his aren't told, and certainly not told in that scope.
So I think that's a good segue into talking about our treatment, because you start off the book talking about Timothy McVeigh, and then you tie it back to the treatment, like the far-right paramilitary groups, and how the FBI has, or how our intelligence communities have looked at violence from the far right in comparison to violence from, foreign actors that are somehow different when engaging in acts of terror in the United States. Why did you choose to do that? Why did you start off with Timothy McVeigh?
So I wanted to demonstrate how the war on terror is just structurally a racist thing. and the way you can also go about seeing the war on terror, not only in the fullness of operations, but in its culture and in its implications, not just for human safety, but human freedom, is in looking at who the war on terror is excluding, who is exempt from the war on terror, who the war on terror leaves untouched. And not because their behavior isn't terrorism. By examining the ways in which before 9/11, the most deadly act of terrorism on American soil was committed by a white supremacist, Timothy McVeigh. And I looked at everything that happened in the wake of the Oklahoma City bombing from the perspective of like its impact on the broader infrastructure of white supremacist militancy in the United States. And the impact is like pretty negligible. Like people are like very concerned about the hammer of the state coming down, but it doesn't come down. It focuses very narrowly, often to the frustration of McVeigh's attorneys, who are trying to say that he is but one cog in this, broader machinery. It focuses very narrowly on McVeigh. The major legislation that's passed afterward, the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act of 1996, explicitly excludes white supremacy from its expansions of prosecutorial and law enforcement tools like enhanced surveillance, especially financial surveillance, and the expansion of webs of association that can be criminalized, material support for terrorism.
Because it's considered a violation of the First Amendment, though, right? Like, technically, they consider white supremacist acts of terror, despite the fact that they are responsible still to this day for the overwhelming majority of acts of terror on U.S. soil, domestic acts of terror. In the aftermath of 9/11, I believe, like, one of the latest, I don't know what the latest estimations are, but I remember, like, a couple of years ago, 75% of the acts of domestic terror on U.S. soil were caused by far-right anti-government extremists, oftentimes people that would comfortably fall under the umbrella of white supremacist terrorists. And that is always considered and always protected under freedom of speech, the constitutionally protected free speech rules. So they've only recently started focusing on white supremacist terror in a different way, I feel like. Right?
And, like veterans of FBI counterterrorism, like say straight out, and, only with, the benefit of hindsight, that, combating white supremacist terror, investigating it, for the FBI was the lowest priority that FBI counterterrorism had, and had throughout the span of the war on terror, despite, as you say, white supremacist terror being the oldest, most violent, and most rooted terrorism in American history. Like 9/11 is statistically an exception when looking at the history of terrorism in the United States. And it's that exception that becomes a template that aims the machinery and the politics of counterterrorism everywhere else but that. One of the reasons I start the book also with this, scene at a white supremacist, essentially like religious militia campground, is so I could kind of write a cliche of the war on terror. The reporter, the American reporter, zoologically almost, taking you through this scary place where men with guns talk about God and sanctifying violence for psychotic purposes that you don't quite understand, except I wanted that scene to be about white people, to show, like with McVeigh, what the war on terror excludes, what's never going to be part of the war on terror, what will ultimately not only benefit from that law enforcement exclusion, but will also draw specific political and cultural strength from the war on terror, as well as political opportunity from it.
What I want to ask you now is some of the stuff that's recently happened with how the FBI or our intelligence communities, definitely not CIA, but definitely FBI, in recent years has like kind of become this bastion of liberalism, or at least they're presenting themselves as that, which I find to be rather strange. But they are actively going after white supremacists and far-right anti-government extremists in a nearly identical capacity to how they, coerced or in certain circumstances took advantage of, like, disabled Muslim teenagers and got them to do acts of terror only to immediately intercept that to get a quick dub here and there. And I feel like there's a comparison there. I don't know if it's if I'm wrong to make this comparison with, like, for example, the good old boys over in Michigan, where where they were going to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
So, one of the things that you really see as a very distinct difference between post 9/11 surveillance on white supremacists and post 9/11 surveillance on Muslims is that it really was post 9/11 surveillance on Muslims. We are talking about a extensive multi-tiered state, local, federal, particularly in big cities like New York, transformation, materially as well as culturally, to be like flush with cash, for treating entire communities' constitutional rights as entirely disposable. Nothing like that is happening or will happen in white communities. Explanations for that are, in one sense, specific and legal. There is no domestic terrorism law of the sort that like liberals like Mary McCord want to pass, but also cultural and historic, which is that, the FBI, to be like really blunt about it, sees white people as people and has a very long history of not seeing many other people as people, and a very recent history of that, particularly with not seeing Muslims and Black people as people. What is starting to change is that there is tremendous political pressure to not have another January 6th. And the way that is manifesting itself is with very otherwise familiar tools from the war on terror of law enforcement, surveillance, and pressure. But there isn't the community surveillance, and to be very clear, ought not to be for anyone.
Well, you can't mass surveil all white people in a similar capacity to mass surveilling all Black people. Like, you can put agents in Dearborn, but you're not going to be able to do that in like every town in the United States of America, especially when you're kind of aligned with them ideologically on a lot of issues, And
that latter point really speaks to it, that there are political constituencies that like see themselves as sympathetic, and not only right-wing constituencies. There are powerful right-wing constituencies for the specific people who are engaged in the insurrection. But the point that I'm driving at is that like we are replicating a very serious error of the war on terror, a very fundamental error of the war on terror, in the sense that the January 6th insurrection and the like reactionary movement that is behind it is a political issue in the United States. It's not a security issue. But because it has such a powerful political constituency, it has political allies in extremely powerful places, particularly in Congress, as well as in state houses, the only tools that liberals will allow themselves to confront it are tools of law enforcement, tools of surveillance. And that is, I think, playing with fire as well, particularly given how we, see the normalization of those tools in the war on terror for increasingly, broader and broader sets of circumstances come into play increasingly as part of, as violence becomes, as non-state violence basically becomes a closer adjunct of normal right-wing politics, state violence is becoming more of an adjunct to mainstream liberal politics. And this is a very, very destructive path to be on. And I mention this to point out how the war on terror, both in terms of opportunity and in terms of like technological development and also like material function, all of the money in the war on terror fuels this entire cycle. It makes all of this both worse and more immediate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. Also, white people always are looking for victimhood, especially conservative white people, who already feel like they're being victimized by, historically marginalized communities gaining like a little bit more prominence, regardless of a lack of material restitution. So if you give them like an actual opportunity, if you like genuinely victimize them in any capacity, they will radicalize way faster than a dude in a CIA-backed madrasa in fucking Pakistan.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I just feel like that will beget significantly more violence than we could ever imagine. So, I don't know what the right way to. I mean, I do know what the right approach to these issues are. Obviously, fixing the underlying material problems that every American faces when it comes to dealing with white supremacist terror. But it's certainly not effective when it comes to having a bunch of like assets or having a bunch of CIA agents texting people being like, hey, you want to do some direct action? Like, here's some Tenorite. It'd be pretty sick if you kidnapped the governor, right? Like, that'd be so fire. Like, God, she's such a bitch. Am I right? And then like, all those text messages are going to inevitably come out in court and you're going to be like, well, this case sucks. This is not like a real instance of a genuine white supremacist terror. Even though instances like that will create other people who are ultimately radicalized and will want to do legitimate acts of white supremacist terror, and often do. So many of those cases happened in the Trump administration that we don't even think about, like the El Paso shooting in Walmart.
Yeah.
Like, that's like, many people in this chat probably don't even remember that. They just remembered that when that happened. Where a person in Texas literally drove to the Walmart in El Paso because he wanted to, in his own words, murder as many Mexican people as he possibly could. That happened. We forgot about it.
The worst single act of like deliberate anti-Hispanic violence, I think, of the last 100 years or so in the United States.
Yeah. So, things are not looking too great. So where can people find you, Spencer? I'm gonna let you go. I don't want you to, I don't want to take up more of your time, and I want to thank you for coming on. You're brilliant, and I hope that people read your book, they buy it, Reign of Terror, and get a.
No, thank you so much. And sorry for all the technical difficulties.
No, it's not a problem at all.
I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Attackerman, ATTACKERMAN. And most of my journalism for a while is going to be at my Substack newsletter, Forever Wars. Reign of Terror is available now. Thank you so much for having me on to talk about it. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on. Okay, before you leave, where are we going next? What do you think is on the where do you think the State Department is like refocusing its interests on? Because there's a lot of news coverage now that the CIA is openly talking about how they are reshifting their focus over to China exclusively. So do you feel like that's the next wave? That's the next Cold War?
I think there is a very significant elite bipartisan constituency, particularly driven by like deep anxieties amongst capital for you know, call it whatever you want, but you know, Cold War with China, for a competition and an imperial struggle for both raw and manufactured resources, for markets, and for the geopolitical dominance that goes along with that. But I don't think that will emerge in contradistinction to the war on terror. I think, you know, we are seeing the entrenchment of the war on terror, you know, outside of the withdrawal from Afghanistan, um, really just become more and more of the firmament, you know, of American foreign policy, unless all of it is abolished. I think that's a very dangerous proposition. That both of these things will continue simultaneously, layered on and accelerating. Um, the use of the particularly surveillance mechanisms and detention opportunities and deportation opportunities and technological innovations and so on of the war on terror and potentially the China Cold War to increasingly be used as part of normalized American politics. And that's one of the reasons I think the war on terror is not only a human emergency, it's an emergency for democracy, and it's an emergency, you know, threatening, you know, freedom.
Oh yeah. And we won't be able to get our treats if China, if we keep engaging in like even a trade war with them. So, you know, no PS5s for anybody.
Unbelievable.
And that's the real crime. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Spencer. You can find Spencer Ackerman at Twitter at Attackerman. Mods are already spamming all of your stuff. He has a Substack called Forever Wars, and his latest book is Reign of Terror. Thank you so much for coming on once again.
Hey, thank you so much.
Bye. Okay, folks. Once again, this community showed that it is completely fucking capable of listening to a goddamn conversation that lasts for an hour without the Twitch streamer actively talking to chat. Every time I have wonderful guests on, I literally fucking remember that I run a daycare and this is not a serious a place where serious conversations can ever occur, and it fucking blows my mind. Anyway, I'm going to run an ad now, and then we're going to get back to fucking the Ben Shapiro video and all this other stuff, okay? But holy fuck, you guys are so insufferable, dude. Like, the majority of chat is absolutely insufferable whenever there's like a interview happening.